You are tired of average. You want more out of life. You know you're capable of something greater. This show will help you become resilient in your home, at work, and in your community. Welcome to the Resilient Humans Podcast with your host, Kevin Wood. If you've ever felt like personal development was getting too fluffy, too guru-driven, or just flat out impractical, well, today's guest is your antidote. Adam Chin is the co-founder of Enlifted, the world leader in practical mindset training. He spent nearly 30 years immersed in personal development, starting under the wing of sales legend Jeffrey Gitomer, and eventually designing training programs for global powerhouses like Ford, Microsoft, and Caterpillar. But Adam didn't just stay in the corporate world. He left the US to reconnect with his roots in Thailand and ended up spending a decade adventuring, healing, and building the foundations of Enlifted, an approach to mindset that skips the fluff and dives into real lasting change. He's part philosopher, part storyteller, part entrepreneur. And just wait until you hear what personal resilience really looks like through his lens. Adam, welcome to the show.
Wow, Kevin, that was a heck of an intro. Yeah, I'm pumped already. Who is this guy? Yeah, I like him.
Yeah. You'd like to meet him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've obviously, in the intro, it talks about you leaving your career of building training programs for Fortune 500 companies to reconnect with your roots in Thailand. I'd love to just start out. What did that move teach you about, resilience, your identity, or success for that matter?
Man, great question, Kevin. Right off the jump here. So I had a really interesting start to my career, and that through serendipity, through the grace of God, I ran into my future employer and mentor, Jeffrey Gitomer, and his team when I was working in a big box store in my last year of school. So, and I was studying what they called back in the day media arts, and I had a degree in multimedia production. And this is in the year 2000. So, um, I was told by many people I would never have a job and I should go into banking and being a lawyer or something like that. But of course, I was the first one of my friends to get a proper job just by, again, luck. And this new wave of new media and multimedia and online media started to come around. So I had known, I had studied education, I had studied multimedia, and so again, through serendipity, I met my mentor, and he brought me in and he said, "Hey, listen, I need someone to run my production studio because I'm making a lot of corporate uh, training for some big clients. And, I'm also making personal development training for them because you can't do sales training without some, self-belief and mindset training. So in this first 5 years of my professional life from 2000 until 2005, I really just I dedicated myself to learning all the tools, the technical tools, and then later the educational tools that Jeffrey was teaching. So we're talking like sales training, we're talking leadership training, we're talking mindset, or what he called attitude training at the time. So after 5 years and working on some pretty big projects with him, like you mentioned in your intro, I had the opportunity to do one of two things. I was 27 and I was not married, no kids, and I was at a crossroads. I could either keep doing what I was doing, and I had toyed with the idea of starting my own company and doing much the same thing immediately um, at that time, or I was like, this is oddly free. I'd been working since I was one of those kids that had a job when I was 13. I was mowing grass. I
Same.
was,
Yep.
I worked at a factory and I drove a forklift without a license for like 3 summers in college. And, I had a job forever. So for this first time in my life, I had this moment where I was like, I'm totally free. I have some money in my pocket. I could do something. My parents had divorced when I was in third grade, and my dad moved back to Thailand. And I said, this is a good time to really connect with that side of the family and that culture, really, for the first time since I was, a kid. So I went over, and that was the goal, and I did that initially. Um, but I started to really love the culture over there, and I started to really dig the people, and I love the perspective shift of what it was like being overseas. And so I stayed for the goal was 6 months, then it became 12 months, and then I ended up staying there 12 years, as it happens. And I went from a shift from, doing the family thing to eventually finding my way to a place called Koh Samui, Thailand. Now that island's rather, I would say, famous now because, certainly at this moment, because as we have this discussion, there is a television show called The White Lotus that's, on HBO, and they just shot their most recent season in Koh Samui. And now a lot of people know about Samoa, but I'd say in the, mid late 2000s, it wasn't as well known, certainly not to Americans. I arrived there on the behest of a friend who said, "Hey, listen, Adam, I know you're into personal development. I know you're into all this stuff. Well, they have a place called the Spa there, and this place called the Spa, they do some kind of hippie healing stuff, but there's all sorts of cool international people, and they're doing yoga, and they're doing this, and they're doing that. And there's EFT practitioners, if anybody knows what that is. There's all sorts of interesting things. But the main thing that it centers around is you go in there and you don't eat for like a week. So that's the whole. That was the entire the main attraction is a fasting spa, a detox spa. And I go, okay, well, I'll check it out. So go down there, and again, why am I drawn to this place? Well, because I know that, again, my mentor has taught me that personal development is number one. You got he said, Jeffrey said over and over to me, the best investment you can make, is in yourself. Number one investment you can make. Doesn't matter, if it's Fang stocks, or if it's the, Amazon in the early 90s or mid 90s. No, no, no. It is yourself. You want to make that investment now. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to get healthy, really healthy. I'm going to learn about my body. I'm going to learn about yoga and all this stuff. So I go there, I do the detox. I don't eat for 7 days. On like about the 10th day after I break my fast, I'm still hanging around. I'm enjoying the community, I'm enjoying all the conversations. I meet this guy, and my friend who knew this guy who showed up said, "Hey, Adam, there's a guy coming to the spa. He's kind of like you. He's from America. He's from the South, because I grew up in the South." And he's like, "So maybe you'll have a friend here." And sure enough, this guy shows up, and he's got his hat turned backwards, and got he's dressed like an extra from Limp Bizkit, or from, one of these, late 90s, early aughts bands. And his name is Mark. And he was, drinking beers and, dipping, tobacco, but he was really, really also interested in all this stuff too. Well, let's just say that here we are almost 20 years later, and Mark is no longer the, at least I would say he's mostly no longer the beer chugging, tobacco dipping guy, and he's definitely more of the, let's call him the greatest coach that most people have ever worked with. Very, very deep thinker, very, very good at what he does, very wise at what he does, practitioner. And I have been his business partner since the year 2015. So it's been 10 years in business and about almost 20 years of knowing him. So that one decision to leave the United States back in 2005, take a detour to Thailand, brought me so many wonderful things, including at the spa. I met my wife, about a year after I met Mark, and she's an amazing person. And I mean, that's an understatement. And that all happened because I took a risk, and at the time, again, a little money in my pocket. That's a great time to be in tech and all this stuff in 2005 to get, an early seat at the table with what was going to come in the next 15 years, the iPhone and all that stuff. But I knew something was missing, that couldn't not, be, satisfied with money alone, and with an investment in something other than myself. So that was a long answer to your question, Kevin. Hope that suffices and was a somewhat entertaining story.
So the key takeaway here is risk can be worth it. And in your case it was. Because you could have gone, you could have chosen not to gone. It seems like that was like a fork in the road for you. Like You chose to go down that path, and it ended up being extremely fruitful for you and for the others around you and for myself included, right? Like it's a whole spider web that kind of just jumps from that one point. There's no way you could have predicted that.
Zero chance. Zero. That is the ultimate. That is the ultimate. My gut decision chose the path rather than my brain chose it. And from that point
Mm,
forward, I would say because of all these things that have happened from that one decision, and again, I've had in these interim years, I've had just as many conflicts. I've had a lot of ups and downs, and as we all do, as we grow in this life. Yet the big wins for me have come almost exclusively through following my gut. And
hmm
what is the gut? What is that? What it's is it the heart? Is it the gut? Is it something beyond the brain, the analytical mind? It's like when you close your eyes and you really feel into a decision, what's it telling you? What's your body telling you? And what's this soul and spirit, you know, telling you? And that's how I made that decision, and that influenced how I made, I would say, every every good decision thereafter.
in in your little bio that you written in before, you talked about yourself as a third culture kid. I'd like you to describe what that means, and then how has your heritage influenced the way you see, people, power, personal growth?
Whew, that's a good question, Kevin. I'm glad I filled that form out. Okay, so a third culture kid, for those of you listening who are unfamiliar with the term, a third culture kid is described as someone who is born in and raised in one culture, yet they have, when they go home, there's a different culture. So they have a greater society that they grow up in that is a culture that they have, but and there's a culture at home. So imagine your typical immigrant. They could be from Eastern Europe, or they could be from uh, Central America, or they could be from East Asia, like my family was. And you you go to school and you've got this typical American suburban lifestyle, and there's 4th of July and there's all this stuff. And then you go, in my case, when I would go to visit my father and his side of the family in Thailand, I suddenly go from 4th of July hot dogs and, Super Bowls and all that stuff to, well, there's big Chinese weddings over here, and there's like big Chinese funerals, and there's Thai, Chinese traditions that are completely different than anything I'm experiencing back home, and completely different than any of my classmates or my peers are experiencing back home. So I have to switch into that mode, and the language, of course, changes, and the mindset has to change. So the idea of a third culture kid is that you're a third culture. You're a combination of the two. So so the negative way of looking at this, and again, this is like a framing way of looking at this, is you could say, oh, well, I don't have any culture. I don't. I'm not like my dad's side, and I'm not like my mom's side. Well, that means I got nothing. I'm just, I'm forever in limbo. That's a negative framing. The positive framing is I've got multiple cultures, and I have multiple ways to express myself. So for me personally, I'm here in the United States right now, and I live here, and I've been here for, the past 5 years, or longer now. And I grew up here, and I could easily, it was like coming back to the States after being in Thailand for a dozen years was just like, it is like maybe a 3 or 4, 5 month, repatriation experience. But it's an easy, it's like fits like an old shoe. And when I go back to Thailand, I go back there, fits like an old shoe, and I just slide right in. So the third culture mentality, if again, if you choose, and I did, to look at it from a very positive framing, one of the benefits you can get is, again, a heightened perspective. So when someone tells you this is just the way it is, you're like, well, that's one of the ways it is.
Right.
Or when you say we're in the United States now, and or I am, and in the past 5, 6 years has been very polarized politically and culturally. You see this, there's like a one side or the other side. Well, and it's framed as an A or B issue, right? Well, for me, I see it as an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So I see because I've seen other cultures. For instance, one example is that, it's this is somewhat controversial, but when when you've I guess recently in the past 6, 7 years, not so much today, but let's say 5, 6 years ago, you would hear this thing where it's like white people they're the most racist people in the world, and I would think to myself, I've listened to Asian people talk in their own native language. White people are like we're talking the JV
Yeah.
league. We're talking like below, like not even Division 1 college, okay, compared to what I've heard in Asia, okay.
Hmm.
So it's things like that. I can put those together, and I also believe that as a third culture kid, one of the things that you learn, that I certainly learned, is diplomacy. So it's knowing that this person is very likely gonna not understand or have a very difficult time understanding the other person and where they're coming from. So you say, okay, I'm going to communicate to this person in the ways that they can understand, and I can communicate to this person in the ways that they understand, and that's going to keep the peace in some ways, but also make them feel acknowledged and feel good about expressing themselves and being heard. Whereas I believe a lot of people in my position would or who are third culture kids or have not studied diplomacy would react. So you just react. Oh, this is a personal issue. I'm
Mm.
so offended. It's like, well, listen, that's okay. This is a good story. This is a good story. Speaking of the whole race thing, I grew up in the South. When I was 12, my mom, because my barber couldn't cut my brother and my hair that day, we had an appointment. So it was a summertime or whatever. My mom said, "Okay, I'm going to take you to my hairstylist, and you're going to wait there. She's going to cut your hair." And I go, "Cool." So she drops this off, and I'm at this typical Southern country woman's hairstylist office, whatever. I'm sitting there. I'm 12. My brother's 8, and she starts talking to us, and she goes, "You know, I, your mama came in here earlier today. She said you and your little brother are going to Thailand this summer." And I said, "Yeah, my dad's over there. We visit him every couple of years at the very least." She's like, "That is so funny, cause all this time I thought y'all was ordered off the television." So so I hear this, and a lot of people certainly today would get offended by this. They
Yeah.
would they would just get raging offense. To this day, I understand that. That woman has never left her home state. I mean, barely. Maybe she went across the border to North Carolina from South Carolina, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. And she's not a bad person. She is not a worldly person. I've traveled 10, 20 times more than she has at the age of 12. So I don't pity her. I don't have any judgment. It's simply that I understand where she's coming from. So there is no reason to react in a negative way and to be offended by that. So how that has affected Enlifted and what we do is you've likely noticed this, Kevin, in your training with us, is that there's a lot of responding and perception to a scenario and to a story that you or I may have in our lives, rather than a reaction, rather than making it a personal, affront, making it a thing that we get upset by in anger. We breathe, we expand our perspective, as Mark likes to talk about, expanding our perspective, and we understand where people are coming from. Is this from a place of true, you know, hate or whatever, or is this from a place of a lack of perspective? What do they mean by these things? How does this impact me, etc.? So I believe I answered your question, Kevin.
Yes, absolutely. That uh, from that obviously stems tons of other questions I have, or just thoughts, really. One is that what you just said really feeds into the concept of curiosity as opposed to judgment. Like you're just, instead of just chucking judgments on whoever's around you for whatever they said for whatever reason or no reason at all, you're still throwing judgment. That's a you problem. Whereas if you come into it with curiosity, it changes the whole dynamics. Oh, well, I actually wonder if they knew what they were saying, or what are their situations? And so I find curiosity just completely kills any resentment or taking offense to things. It won't happen if you have that curiosity mindset.
Absolutely. It's a great word, curiosity. And I do also really enjoy that translation of going from react to respond, because I think curiosity helps us go from react to respond. You know,
Absolutely.
and also the breath, the listeners who've heard Mark on the show before, you take a breath, you breathe. Perspective widens. Okay. Now I can be curious because the story is not glued to the front of my face like one of those characters, those monsters from Alien, the movie, where it's just stuck on my face and I can't pull it off. Now I can pull that story back and I can start to see it. And when I can see it, I can be curious about it rather than react because it's
Yep.
on my face and I can't get it off.
I will say some deep breaths have gotten me out of a few road rage incidents. They didn't cut me off on purpose. It's just, it's, if I just take a breath and realize, oh, we're all trying to get to the same spot in a hurry, we'll get there.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll
Well,
get
I
there.
mean, it's funny because in our course, in core language upgrade, one of the stories we use in that course to talk about these reactions and projections in particular is when I was driving once, this is years ago, and I told my wife, I was like, "Did you see that guy? He's hiding in my blind spot." And it's
Yep.
then we looked at that. We said, "What is he really? Is he conspiring to hide? Is he just where's his blind spot? I'm going to hide there. I mean, is
Yep.
this a personal thing or is this guy simply a poor driver? Or am I a poor driver? That could be it. That could be it too. I could be
Lots
driving
of
poorly.
options. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd love to ask why personal development? And then there's a part two to this. What's one thing that the personal development world gets totally wrong?
Ooh, man. Uh, those are two big questions. Okay, so I'll start with the first one. Why personal development for me? I already mentioned it. My parents divorced when I was young, and that was, as a lot of people know, you look at the numbers, the stats around people and kids who've gone through divorce. It's tough. You add in the whole different culture, and then my dad going
Mm,
back overseas. That's really tough. Again, it was in the early 80s. It wasn't like a multicultural America like you see today. So I was the weird kid. I was the ethnic kid where I grew up. So there's all these sort of these things that I had to sort out and figure out, what to do with all this stuff. Um, and of course, for me, and my mom was very young when I was born. She was 22, 23. She just turned 23. And so she was learning and figuring out life, and there's all these things that I had to sort out. And the one thing I would say that both of sides of my family were, in a very positive light. They both had come from tough situations and made something more of themselves. I would say exclusively, on both sides. My Chinese, I say Chinese Thai because my grandparents both came from China, and they migrated to Thailand during the Maoist takeover of China. So they actually went they changed where they lived. My great grandfather started a business in Thailand, and they turned it into a bigger business, and they did well for themselves. On my mom's side, there's a lot of there's a lot of tragedy and divorce and things like that too, broken families, and they picked themselves up and they made something of their lives. So this sort of thing, and it's a very American thing too, is to build yourself into something better, to strive for something better. So to me, it was either you give up or you get better, and giving up was not negation knowledge, if your audience knows what that is, an option. So it's get better, how to and how to do that, right? So that's why it was so alluring to me especially when I met Jeffrey, and he introduced me to Dale Carnegie and to Napoleon Hill and to the greats Jim Rohn, Earl Nightingale, all these classic authors of personal development. He was the first person to put those people into my worldview, and I just soaked it up, and of course his teachings as well. Your second question, rephrase it again one more time, Kevin. What was it exactly?
what What's one thing that the personal development world gets totally wrong?
Oh, such a good question. Okay, so in soaking up all the classics, the golden age of personal development guys, especially in the Americas, we would say that those are the classic guys. Of course, you could go back even further to Marcus Aurelius and all the Stoics, and
Mm.
you can go to the Bible, you can go to the world religions. There's so many things to learn. As far as what personal development gets wrong, like anything, like any people, there are a lot of people out there who are searching for answers. They're in a bad situation. They're in a tough situation. They are in a position where they've had a terrible breakup, or they were abused as children, or they're dealing with some tragic circumstances, or they're just lost and they feel like disconnected uh, with the world and with themselves. I would say that there's a lot of people in our space, and I believe they fit under the umbrella of personal development, who have a tendency to overcomplicate some of these problems, solutions and problems. They overcomplicate them both. And they do it with from a wide variety of backgrounds. Like, you'll see people overcomplicate things in traditional therapy. They'll essentially have people just keep digging their own grave into this old debilitating story until the debilitating story is so ingrained in them that they can't fight out. So it's the opposite of what we do in Enlifted, where we try to build a perspective from the story so we can see that it's just a story. Whether you choose to believe it or not after you've seen it in three dimensions, that's up to you. But if I never allow my client to pull away from it and examine it, instead I lock them closer to it, I keep the grip even firmer, I believe that's malpractice. On the other side of things, you've got a lot of people in the, let's say, the hippy dippy woo woo world, where Mark and I have both had a nice bit of experience in, as visitors, as tourists. Let's say that tendency seems to be more of the, let's use all this fluffy, ambiguous language, and let's oh, well, my third eye is telling me that my shadow is not allowing me to make an abundance prayer for today. And it's like, that you said nothing. That means absolutely nothing. You are completely confusing yourself and everybody around you by saying stuff like this, because it's the opposite of practical, right? It's like, I don't know. It's like your shadow side. What does that mean? What does abundance mean? What does manifestation mean? What is inner child work? It's like, you got to simplify it. You got to break it down into something you can do today, and work on at the moment. These big, you know, they're almost like these big cumulus clouds in the sky. They just get bigger and more shapeless, and by the time you get an idea of what you think they are, they've changed. You know,
Yeah.
so you know, again, even if the people who are practicing in those worlds have the best of intentions, both from the client side and the practitioner side, to me, the problem in the personal development industry is that there is a lot of that. It's either way too ambiguous, or they get people so stuck and keep them stuck in these stories, um, that they'll never be able to break free from them, and build better stories. So
Something that I've heard through and lifted as well is smarty pants coaching. I never heard that term before, but now I understand it, and because I'm aware of it, I see it more often. It's in my reticular activating system, so I constantly see, like, you're just telling people the answer. You're literally just going to the back of the math textbook and saying, this is the answer and it's the only answer. When you and I both know there are multiple answers, and it means more when they find it themselves, not with you telling them. And so for me, that's the one of the biggest things is that's where the personal development world is getting it wrong is because you're just giving them the answers. That's that's not coaching at all.
It's absolutely, that's one of Mark's greatest terms, because it's so emblematic of Mark's style in that he
Yeah. Yeah.
he calls it smarty pants coaching. That term sounds so elementary and childlike, yet you immediately get it, and it describes a phenomenon that's really complex and it's actually quite sophisticated. Because if if I go in as a practitioner, I sit down and I have, and my goal as a professional coach would be to work with, let's say, 10, 20, 40, 50 clients in a given year at the very least, right? If I'm depending on what my goal is, right, as a coach. And I have to have the right correct answers for every single one of these people who are coming from a variety of backgrounds and circumstances. That is hell on earth. It's this is, and of course this is the pharmaceutical approach. This is the sort of the allopathic medicine approach to coaching, is that I have a pill, that pill's going to cure you, and I'm going to talk to you for 5 minutes, you're going to fill out this form, and then that's going to be fine, and then we'll check in next year and see how you're doing. The issue is that certainly when it comes to personal development, each person is going to bring their own wisdom. We operate at Enlifted by the we operate from the perspective that the person has the answer. The person coming to us as either the practitioner or coming to us as a company in our trainings, they have the answers that they are seeking. Those answers are simply stuck or locked up somehow. They just can't get to them, and the goal of an Enlifted coach is to help that person get to a point where they can move things around energetically, move emotions, move even intellectual through word games and puzzles, to see things in a different way, through somatic experience, through breath. So now I can get to those answers. But because before I was thinking those same stories in the same way over and over and over again. And because I'm doing that, it's like trying to pick the lock of a door, and I'm just doing it the same way over and over and over again, trying to get the lock to open. That is not here's a new key. Try this one. What? Okay, cool. I didn't know I had this key in my keychain. Yeah, you do. Try that one. They open the door. So that's what separates us to a certain extent from a lot of other modalities.
And I just to add on to that, really it's about asking the right questions because oftentimes those answers are locked because they haven't asked the right questions yet. And that's what a coach, an enlifted coach especially, has the unique ability to do is ask the right questions so that they can say, "Oh, I never thought about it that way before." Well, it's because you couldn't. Now you can. And there's the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah, that's actually a translation that Mark uses in the certifications now, is that it's not that I n- I never thought of it that way before. It's like you couldn't think of it that way before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
So the whole the answers push, questions pull concept. I'm certain that Mark used that with you in the training. Um, it holds up. It works consistently.
Absolutely. So you mentioned earlier about, if you're working with, 40 to 50 people in a given year, all walks of life. For yourself, you've obviously worked with elite performers and as well as everyday people. What what story do both groups struggle with the most? Have you seen any patterns between?
Whew. I mean, you hear it a lot. I'm not good enough. I mean, that's a greatest hits of personal development and of story work. The Unlifted method, we hear every single time is I'm not good enough. I don't belong.
Side note, do you think that's cultural? Being from
Man,
somebody that's seen a lot of different cultures. For me personally, my view is that it's kind of like a Western society thing, but you might have
oh,
your own perspective.
oh, I would say that the West is a light years beyond the East. The East, there's a lot of cultural repression, and there's a lot of familial repression, like within the family dynamic and within the social dynamic, that has people play very small in East Asia. So I
Okay.
think America is actually ahead of the curve with that. That said, it's a human trait. I mean, if you get you think about, the stuff that Jordan Peterson talks about with, like, like are you Canadian, by the way, Kevin?
Yes.
Okay. The Jordan Peterson talks about like how in Canada all the tall trees get cut down because it's like the Canadian culture seems to be more of a like I don't want to put my head up, like I don't want to be the gazelle in the savannah that's marching to my own beat because that's the one the lions are going to pick off, right? Like I want to blend in, I want to hide, you know. So I think that that's a survival mechanism, that ties in with the I'm not good enough or who am I to do this? Who am I? Who am I to be in this room with all these awesome people? It's like, again, like
Yeah.
you and I spoke about before we started rolling, it's like, answer the question, who am I to be involved with these awesome people? Well, write it down. I'm this and I did this and I did this and I did this. That's why I am here with these awesome people. So yeah, to directly answer your question, I believe this is less cultural. I think it's programmed into our survival mechanism as human beings.
It's fascinating. And it's it's a story that's lasted the test of time. I'm sure these stories of I'm not good enough, it's not a recent phenomenon. It's happened throughout the millennia. What's one practical way that we can help combat that?
Well, to use one of Mark's famous lines he uses in the cert, the difference between I'm not good enough and good enough, think about it. Not good enough, good enough. It's one word,
Yeah.
good enough. It's like, am I good enough? Just pull that out of there and look at it. I'm good enough to be on this podcast with you right now, Kevin. I'm good enough. Why am I good enough? Let's list the reasons. So, again, part of the ways that we help people get over this story, as we call it, an I'm not good enough story, is through breathing. And then a part of it is, as we famously do, is we have them write things down because a lot of times, you and I are talking extemporaneously here, but if I were coaching someone, or if we were working with a client and the lifted coach is working with a client, they would have them write these stories down first. Because as soon as that person gets the I'm not good enough out of their head and down on paper, starts listing reasons and reading those stories out loud, and starts breathing them, they can start to see the imagery in their imagination associated with these stories, right? They could start to understand the feelings associated with these stories. They could start to go back and realize, oh, well, the first time I felt like this was when I was 12 and it was a baseball game and whatever. They are able to see where these stories come from. And then you can, once you write it down, all of a sudden those stories that have no end, they have no beginning, they're just feelings with a sharp pain associated with it. Those things go from being intangible to tangible. It's like in Ghostbusters. Remember the movie Ghostbusters, the original one, where they put the little trap, and then the little they throw it on the ground, and then they can hit the button with their foot, and then it sucks the ghost down into the trap. That's what you're doing when you're writing the story down on paper. You're taking it from up here as a ghost, and you're putting it in a trap. And then once it's in a trap, you can analyze it. You can start to look at it. Because you switch the power dynamics go from the story's running me to I'm running the story. And that's a massive shift.
I feel like we're the same age. You're using all the exact same references. We've read all the same books. I swear to God. I don't know how
Yeah.
old you are, but I'm 44. You
Oh,
must be
yeah, yeah.
close.
I'm 48. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
we're in the same ballpark.
You're talking about early 80s and all these things. I'm like, yeah, saw that. Yeah, read that. Yeah, it was there. So that's funny. Uh, in your little bio when you wrote that you have descended from royalty on both sides. I was fascinated by that. How has that story influenced or even complicated your own self-image?
Wow. Yeah, I was surprised I put that in there. I put that in there simply because it's something I've rarely talked about before. I'm uncertain if even Mark knows that.
All
Again,
right.
so if my dad, again, listen, that sounds like this is some highfalutin thing, right? And just to make it very clear, I grew up, I would say, lower middle class here in the States. Now, when I went to Thailand to visit my dad, they had a little bit more, they were upper middle class. Let's put it that way. But when I here, it was, let's say, right on the verge of, are we gonna, be able to get new school clothes this year? you know, so but looking at that, uh, my aunt, who's a big time, what's it called, the family tree, the genealogy person, she's got the whole thing mapped out. She went and she looked at the whole thing on my mom's side, and she goes, we're actually related to this guy, Lord Calvert. He's the guy that started there. He founded the state of Maryland, and he was an English lord, and all these. And I was like, that's really interesting considering some of the years in which I grew up. And then on my dad's side, like my dad always told me, he's like, this is, by the way, this is not like a big deal because a lot of Chinese descended people are, but he goes, your lineage goes back to the Qin dynasty. He's like, it goes back, and we even spell our name in the Chinese Mandarin, or the Chinese character, in the same way that allegedly the emperor did during that time. But it's just like how, what is it? What's the percentage? It's something like one out of every 8 East Asian men are related to Genghis Khan. It's like
Right, right, right.
they did a lot of procreation. Let's put it that way. So it's not an exclusive club. How it affected me? That's a good question. I I think because I'm so into personal development, because I'm so into this world of like developing ourselves and tapping into like hidden potential within us. I think less about DNA and lineage than I do about the other stuff. You know, Yet when you all you got to do is hang out with a little kid and next to their parent, and you say, "Wow, that's interesting. That showed up. That little child is acting just like his
Mhm.
dad, who I've known for 30 years, or just like her mom, who I've known for 30 years." And you go, "Whoa, that's that's weird." So how does it affect us? Who knows? I have no idea how that affects me, other than knowing that if you go down the family tree far enough, there's someone very cool, and my goal is to live up to that in some capacity.
Very cool. And I know you also are a fan of classic cinema. Uh, how has that shaped your understanding of human behavior and the concept of resilience?
Good question. The I
Man,
studied
if you keep saying that after every question, I'm going
yeah.
to have a really inflated head here. So
That's a really good question. I'll keep saying it.
great.
Uh, because I studied film as well, and my media course, and I've studied it my whole life. I'll read books, like I read screenwriting books, I read cinematography books, I'll read on my shelf there. I've got Tarantino, Coppola, I've got all of them, and I've read Joseph Campbell. That's obviously one that ties right into the hero's journey, right? Into like how we structure ourselves, how we go through, and how we interpret our lives. Okay, that's a good place to start. I would say by understanding how movies are structured, and movies are using the 3 act structure that is developed from the works of Joseph Campbell, and of course he's using the structures of the Iliad and the Odyssey and the ancient Greeks, and he's looking at all these, the Beowulf, he's looking at all these very ancient stories. So you look at the lineage of how these stories are structured, and you see that there is this pattern that emerges, through all um, of these writings, and and you could trace it up to the most basic Hollywood action blockbuster. You know, there is a person who starts out and they're unformed. That's act one. They're who they are. They call that the thesis of the movie. Think about the Karate Kid. There's another 80s movie for you.
Yep.
There's a young man who's this is who he is. He's unformed. Luke Skywalker, same thing. And he could stay who he is, and that's one trajectory, but he yearns for something bigger, something greater. He, she, whatever. All of a sudden, there's a catalyst. Something happens. Something different happens in their lives, and they could take the call, beckoning the call of the something else than what they're doing. Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up. The droids show up. Mr. Miyagi shows up for Daniel LaRussa. The and he's being beat up by his new classmates. So he's got to do something. He can just keep being a loser who's angry at the world, or he can step up and do something totally uncomfortable and totally different. Okay, that pushes us into Act Two, and he's in Act Two. This hero, Harry Potter, you name it, is now in a different world, a completely upside down world, training with Mr. Miyagi, who's his mentor, his guide, Obi-Wan, his mentor, his guide. They're doing wild stuff together, Harry at Hogwarts. And then this is called the antithesis part of a person's story arc. Okay. So the opposite of. So in some ways, this is like my journey to Thailand. All right. That's a completely different world living there for 10 or 12 years. And then finally, once you go through all these trials and tribulations and you work through all this stuff, you go to a point where you just can't do this anymore and you have to do something else. You have to stop this antithesis world, and you've got to break through and become the person you're going to be. That's Act Three, what they call synthesis. It's thesis plus antithesis is synthesis. The old world, the old person you started as, the new person you became, in the new world, you combine them together into one. And that's who you grow into in Act Three, right? And these stories, these are epic stories I'm talking about, but they can be literally, it could be a day. Like you wake up one morning and like, oh man, I don't want to do that. It's going to be a tough day. And then you get up and you push through it and you challenge yourself and oh man, I didn't want to go out and do this run today. I didn't want to do this workout today. I didn't want to go and meet this person today. You push through it. You do something different. It's uncomfortable. Third act, end of the day. Oh man, oh, what a great day. I'm so satisfied with who I am. I'm different today because of what I did. And you can make these stories small at the day level. You can make them at the week level, you can make them at the macro and micro. It could be your whole life. So I believe that the basic story structure that films teach us can be used to help us map and understand our lives, because that's how we make sense of the world that we're in, Kevin. Like we have to have a story. Like the whole thing, it's what we teach it in Enlifted. It's like there has to
Yeah.
be we have to have a story. Like because otherwise it's all chaos, right? We don't know. It's just like another day you wake up and this you have to make sense of it. And you make sense of it through a story. So, Hollywood, the Dream Factory has helped us do that, at the Cineplexes for 100 years, 120 years. Novels were doing that prior to that, and campfire tales were done before that, so we have to find out how to tell these stories. And it doesn't have to follow the strict 3-act structure. It can be any sort of story where we understand life better through story. And by the way, that's one of the reasons recently, Kevin, I've been reading a lot more fiction. Like I was one of those
Mm.
guys, like many people, that their whole bookshelf was just this Malcolm Gladwell book, followed by this Cal Newport book, followed by this whatever, and this new nonfiction. I was
Are you in my house right now?
yeah, right. I mean, that was basically my thing for 15, 20 years almost. I mean, I was that guy, And then slowly and surely I realized like, those books are fine. You can learn some things there. I'm learning a lot more through reading fiction. And so I'm understanding what it's like to be human a little more through reading fiction, and good fiction. I mean, I'm sure you can learn some stuff from reading a Michael Connelly book or something like that, an airport novel, fine. But if you read, some classic 20th century literature or 19th century literature, you're going to see some really interesting insights into what it's like to be human. So I've done that myself because I want to understand what my, or I want to help myself understand what my journey is here, what my story is here.
That was a cool journey you just took us down. Uh, Cinema, and like you said, now books as well can have a huge impact on us and the way we view the world. And I really like that you touched on the story aspect to it, because it's really how most most meaningful messages are put out through that concept of story. I don't think we would have survived this long into humankind without the concept of stories, and even song. Song is another important one. I actually had an enlifted graduate. God, what was her name? Siren. Sammy Siren.
Oh, Sammy Sotocario.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
She's a
we
great
talked a
singer.
lot about
Yeah.
like the power of music and song and stuff. So yeah. Um, if you could only teach one main principle of mindset to a family member or let's say your best friend, what would that principle be?
Whew. Wow, teaching. I was going to say great question again, Kevin, but I held back.
I saw it on the end of your
Yeah,
lips.
I held back. I controlled myself. Uh, to a family member because there are so many. I am I'm very reticent. Reticent is the wrong word. I'm My family has an idea of what I do, but, it's rare that I proselytize anything,
Mhm.
with my family. I'm like, they know what I do. If someone's interested, they come and ask me, they talk to me. I feel that I am a source of stability and calm in my family, which is cool. Um, if I could only teach one thing, because there's two ways of looking at this, because there's like what can be taught simply and effectively every single time. Because something like breathing, you can tell everyone to breathe. Like, hey, listen, before
Yep.
you react and respond, before you get upset with yourself or the world, take a moment. Where's your breath? Is it in your belly? Is it up high? Breathe low and slow. Okay. That's something that I believe everyone will be open to.
Yes.
Now, what would I like everyone to be able to understand?
That's a different question.
Yeah, that I believe is that it's all a story. It's a story. You won't believe what my parents told me when I brought this guy home. Do you believe it? H- Is that the truth? Is that a story? Are you attached to that, or is it something that you're willing to look at from other angles? Because if you're emotionally and intellectually attached to that story, that's you're going to run with that. That's going to rule the rest of your day, week, month, life. If you can see it as a story, you have options. And that's going to give you tremendous freedom. That's the lesson I would like to teach everyone. But it takes a while to get a person there generally. And this is what we do in
I
Enlifted
agree.
is we get people is like, can you get to the point with breath, with writing it down? And Kevin, I will eventually send you, I'm working on a book that teaches the Enlifted method in a workbook form that's meant for people to use on their own. If having never, been coached by an lifted coach, pardon me, or been in the program with Mark, you'll just get this workbook and you'll sit down with it and you'll open it up and start learning about all this stuff. The most challenging part of writing that book was how to approach someone cold who
Mm.
is sitting there boiling in a story, just rage, just or sad or emotionally upset in some way that gets them attached to that story. How do I talk them through a process to allow them to start seeing uh every story they tell themselves as a potential interpretation of that story, not the truth. And so the way I did it in the book, and I'm interested to get your feedback on this eventually, Kevin, is we start with a small story, something small, something light, and then you start working your way up, and you say, "Oh, okay, well, that was a story about the fact that the guy from Uber Eats brought the wrong sandwich, and I got mad today." And then, okay, well, we can work there. Let's start there. That's something we can work on, and then eventually get to the stuff with your mom or your dad or your ex-wife or husband or whatever.
Yep. Totally agree. I like the concept of starting with something small, like the three terms that I've heard used quite often, and I use it when I do my workshop is something that annoys you, something that hurts you, and something that haunts you. Let's start with the annoying thing, like that guy that cut you off in traffic, or the guy that screwed up your coffee order. Like those are annoyances. We can start there. It's very simple to work with, and then you can start getting into the bigger stuff from that.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mark says that in the cert, and it's a great little a little heuristic that you can use as a coach. Yeah, start them off with something that annoys. And then if you start there, it's like, oh, oh, oh. So if you can see that, wonder what else is available to see with other
Correct.
things.
I guess one of my main principles, and it's one that I wish, one that I am helping others identify as a practical solution, and you mentioned this earlier, Adam, is writing it down. Like that's it. I've worked with so many people that have come into my office and they are literal machine gun mouth. Like not like they can't even catch their breath between the words that they're saying over and over and over again. And it's as simple as let's write that down. And I just slide a sheet of paper and a pen across the table and I say, everything you just said there, I want you to write that down. And as soon as I say that, as soon as they pick up the pen, you can visually see them take a deeper breath. I didn't teach them that. I didn't cue them up. It wasn't like a baseball on a tee. They just naturally did it. It's a human response to slowing things down. And then their whole physiology falls in line. Anybody that says they don't have control over their physiology is full of shit. You do indirectly by the actions that you take. And one of those actions can be as simple as picking up a pen. And that's why I found it so important. I have it tattooed on my arm. It's abracadabra in a pen. That's the key. That is literally the key to unlocking your stories, your mindset, your identity. The list goes on.
Let me ask you, first of all, that was really, really energizing, what you just said, for me personally. Let, eh, have you noticed a difference in having someone write it down with a pen rather than a Google document
Yes.
on a tell me that difference, please, if you don't mind, or
Yep.
describe the difference.
It's uh it's the just being in the room with the person. It's a different connection. And you know this. You already know this. You knew the answer before you asked it. It's when you feel that connection with the person, when you can hear the sound of the writing implement on the paper, you have that textile, that feeling of writing it out. It's like something's getting poured out of you. Like it's a physical sensation. Whereas when you just see words being changed on a screen in front of you, it's like you're like an observer as opposed to you crossing the words, like physically crossing them out and rewriting them. Now you're the participant. That's the main difference.
That's awesome. So I mentioned the book earlier. So we're writing it as a workbook, an activity book. So this is not again, uh, no, all praise to the Malcolm Gladwell's, Tim Ferrisses out there in the world who are writing these nonfiction books, and to Carol Dweck, who wrote the most popular mindset book of all time, which I just reread. And okay, whatever.
So did I.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's cool. There's a lot
Yeah.
of examples of people who use mindset in a positive way. Nice. Thanks for bringing that mindset concept to the masses. Thank you. I want people to interact. This is their journey, right? I want them to interact with this book. This is some word games in there. There's activities. I would say half the book at least is an activity. More than half is an activity. And I want it to be in print. I want people to buy this and I want them to use a pen or a pencil to write these things down. And there is evidence out there. There's research, and you can do a little googling or AIing yourselves out there listening to this about the difference between brain activity with someone typing versus writing
Yep.
with their hand. It's very interesting. And if once I get a better grasp on the research and check it a couple of different times from different sources myself, I will speak more authoritatively on it. I will say from what I've seen thus far, it's very interesting, and it does really suggest that writing with a hand instrument, a pen or a pencil, does make a big difference in how our brain's going to process this information when we rewrite our stories. So I believe that, like you said as well, the physical, the being in a room with a real human being. I mean, listen, AI is going to do all this computer stuff in the next 5 to 10 years. AI is going to do it all. So we're going to have to get better at being human beings, because right now, in this interim period, in the past, whatever, 10, 20 years, 30 years, you can go back, we've had to do a lot of we've had to become more like computers, because the computers couldn't do it on their own. But the computers are going to do it on their own here pretty soon. They're just going to do it. So that means we're going to have to go back and get better at being human beings again. So I believe, even though my handwriting, let's face it, I'll admit to it, it's not so good. It sucks. Um, I'm writing more and more by hand now, to have that connection and to be with other people, to be in a community, to be with, one on one with a coach. In your case, what you're talking about, there's something that is intangible about that. Something that's very human. It's very human to be with another person, speaking, talking, writing, and your podcast is called Resilient Humans, so I figured that was a good transition.
There you go. And everybody knows this just based on, for instance, if you get a happy birthday message on your Facebook wall versus you got a handwritten card sent you in the mail, which one means more? You already know the answer. It's the one that was handwritten. And it feels better to write out a handwritten card and send it to somebody than it does to just sit behind a computer screen and type it out. So we all know that. We need to tap into that more. And I say need, it's a need. It like you said, computers are going to be taking over the world. We need to tap into that human experience more now. It has to start now.
Yeah, you and I are never going to outcomputer a computer. That's like, I mean, really? Like, I'm going to outcomputer a computer? No, a computer's going to be way better at computing than I am. But I can outhuman a computer forever. I don't care
Any
how
day.
how good AGI gets or what. I don't care. We're always going to be better at being human beings. So the question is, am I getting better at being a human being? Am I checking in with people? And
Mm,
am I able to love people? Do I have love in my heart? Am I able to forgive people? Am I able to listen to people? Do I value time with people? These are all, it's like, that's being, because if I'm not, then yeah, maybe a computer can get better at that. If I'm shut off from the world, if I'm, stuck in my story, and I'm unable or unwilling to leave because of pain or the lack of safety I feel, whatever. It's like, no, it's important that we get better as human beings. That's the whole experience. We came here as human beings for a human experience. That's the whole reason we're here, is to be human beings, you know?
what a cool way to measure progress. Like we measure progress on computers. Like you think 25, 30 years ago, what were computers? Like you couldn't have a pocket sized calculator. It needed to fill a freaking room, right? And now it can do literally anything you want. And how are we measuring our human progress?
Yeah.
Are
And
you being more human now than you were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, right?
I love technology. I've been a big technology guy for a long time. We're having this conversation thanks to technology. I'm so grateful for it for so many reasons. Yet, with as Peter Parker's was it Peter Parker's uncle, with great power comes great responsibility,
You
right?
know it.
The old standby quote, so true. It's like, well, with this technological power, the responsibility is for us to use this with humanity and to become better
Mm,
human beings. So that is something that I think about a lot. And to me, the work we do with Enlifted is a way for people to tap into that humanity, to get, because a lot of this is just stuck energy. Let's face it. Like all this stuff that we're working, when you work with a client, when I'm working, you're doing, classes, and we're working with coaches and training them. You hear these, it's all, or I'm doing my own work. It's like, oh, that's just stuck energy. I got to move this energy around. And you can use it in the woo woo sense, you can use it in whatever sense, but there's something that's stuck there, and it's instead of moving, it's trapped and it's going in this loop. We just need to move that around. And when we move it around, we can be in flow. And when we're in flow, we're better people to be around, or we're better people to other people. We can help other people versus just being stuck in our own narcissistic, doom loop, over and over and over. So this is all
mm.
related. It may sound a bit out there for some of the listeners, but this is all related.
Nah, I see it. I see it every day. Shameless plug here, but being a CrossFit gym, we see those energies being moved daily through people's actual physical movements through their bodies, and then also the interactions that they have with other people. If you go to a traditional gym, everybody's got their headphones on, they're plugged in, like they're not interacting at all, and that energy is basically staying stuck in their body. They're only trying to let the physical happen. You have to have that human connection is so important that people forget about it, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to the gym for, you know, to work out, to lose weight, to get a good sweat on XYZ, whatever it is, when really we could be using it as a way of creating better connections with our fellow humans. And that's part of the reason why I believe CrossFit gyms are and have been and will continue to be so successful, is because we offer that human connection where you get that energy exchange and it feels damn good when you're done.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like we've had such a major a major connection with CrossFit box owners, CrossFit coaches, CrossFit athletes with Enlifted. That's made up a sizable chunk of our graduates simply because I believe you nailed something that your community, the CrossFit community, values humanity and values being human and having human interaction. And that is what separates that community from a lot of other people who just, okay, I'm gonna go to whatever, the gym and just hit the elliptical machine with my headphones for 45 minutes and whatever, or just go lift on my own. It's missing something. So yeah, we yeah, that's really interesting that this conversation went in that direction because it is really about being better at being human. And the CrossFit community understands this instinctively. It's a holistic it's a holistic solution to the problem
And
rather than,
I hate that word,
yeah,
but it's true.
and it's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those words that the people I talked about earlier would use, "Hey, man, you've gotta really, tune into the right chakra and, open yourself up to this new container and this geometry of who you are." It's like, "No, no, 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 no." But, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the word in this case does fit. It is a human holistic approach. So, yeah, wow, okay.
Yeah, and that's the funny part. Like I talked about earlier, how I have a few questions written out, but wherever this goes, and this has been a really cool. I wouldn't even call it a tangent because it's all connected. So it's been a really good conversation in that sense, and I guess that's kind of how my business, and I've talked about it on this podcast before, evolved over the years. We're going to be celebrating our 17 years in business in 3 weeks. And it's been a hell of
Congratulations.
a journey, but it started out as just fitness. That's all I cared about. It was like,
Yeah.
I want to tell everybody about CrossFit and have everybody do thrusters and pull-ups and make their hands rip open and then take a picture of it, right? Like that was it. And I was like, all right, but there's something more than just fitness. So I started getting into the nutrition side of it and coaching people on that. And they were getting pretty good results until they weren't. And I was like, well, there's another missing piece. And that's when I started searching out the mindset stuff. I was like, that's the third piece that kind of locks all of this together. And so it is my belief that if you are truly balanced in your fitness, your nutrition, and your mindset, that you are a truly resilient human. Those are the three
Yeah,
components. And
absolutely.
if one of those is off or you're neglecting one of those, it's like a three-legged stool. It's going to fall over. It can't be held up alone on just two legs. You need the third leg there. And so thanks for Enlifted for filling up that final leg, because that was the one that was, it kept that chair kept falling over and over and over again. And so it's the Enlifted program that's helped me keep it steady.
Well, thank you for supporting us and what we do and being a shining example of the sort of coach, box owner, person that we want to associate ourselves with. It could be an ambassador for Enlifted and all the things that we're doing is that's, you know, when those three legs are on the ground and the chair is functioning well, I believe that's when we have the best opportunity to really open up the real or the next layer, and that's that connection to soul, spirit, to the divine, whatever you want to say, whatever you want it to, again, this is not a theological conversation, but there is something beyond just the animalistic, experience of being on this earth, and I do believe that when those legs are on the ground, and our bodies are, and our bodies are minds, um, and our, all of those things are working in tandem, we are able to give more. It's no great secret. I mean, Dave Ramsey talks
Yeah.
about it in his
Yeah.
finance advice. Ramsey says, in his finance talks, like, hey, I want to make more money so I can help more people.
Yeah.
Because if I'm broke, and my sister's in trouble, or my nephew's in trouble, what am I going to do? They have two broke people now. It's like, I want to be able to help. Charitable work, dedicate my time to helping other people. So it's this beautiful flywheel of positive action.
I wrote this down as you were talking. It's the ripple effect. It truly is. There's so many analogies now, like the airplanes. If the oxygen mask comes down, you got to put yours on first. Well, this is not an emergency situation, but when you are truly, yourself, you have your fitness, your nutrition, your mindset all dialed in. How much more helpful are you to others? And how much more of a role model are you for others as well? And that people feed off that. It's a ripple effect. When you take care of your own, we'll call it your temple, it's going to affect the people around you. It's going to help lift them up. A rising tide lifts all boats, but it has to start with you. You're the first person that you have to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we all contribute to the culture that we're a part of too, because that sort of behavior, that sort of attentiveness and attention towards our bodies, our nutrition, how we conduct ourselves, that helps build the culture that we are, because we're active members of the culture,
Yeah.
you know, and man, culture that's a whole other conversation for another
Oh
podcast.
my God, we could go
Yeah,
into
but yeah,
that.
yeah,
In order to
that's
change a culture, it has to start with you. You can't change everybody. It starts with, anyway, that's a
yeah.
big one. That's a
And
really
that
big one.
Yeah, and as a third culture kid, having seen other cultures and have visited a lot of cultures in my life, and been a part of them, man, you could see it's like, why are the Japanese the way they are? Why are the Thai people the way they are? Why are the
Mm,
Chinese the way they are? Why are the Americans? It's like you start to see, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is all cultural. What does that mean? Because cultural is very magnetic, and cultural can, it's like, what is it? I mean, there's like the very classic Peter Drucker line. It's like, culture, I think it's culture eats management for breakfast, and it's like culture trumps any sort of management or training or directive, because the culture of this company, if it's good, or the organization, if it's good, you don't have to train it. It just is, and
yeah,
just it's like how you do things, how you be, so another conversation, Kevin.
sure.
This one was awesome. Thank you for inviting me.
No
um,
problem. And before I let you go, I always ask my guests the same question to finish us off. So the last question is, well, I'd like to hear what your definition of resiliency is in your own words.
ooh uh Start and keep going. Just keep going. Uh, I'm a big fan of the anti-fragile concept.
Yep.
I'm sure you know about this. It's like, it's when you drop the glass on the ground, it breaks. When you drop, another, you know, plastic, whatever, it shatters. But certain things you can drop, and it actually makes it better. It's not. It doesn't. Maybe it's a plastic. Okay, it's fine. It's where it was before you dropped it. Glass shatters. It's worse than when you dropped it. But certain things, like human beings, if you drop them, you pick them up, they're better. There's like a patina of resilience that's coated on them, and you can see that, and you can look in that person's eye. And and Kevin, I'm sure you're this person for a lot of people, and I'm sure you know a lot. You have the fortune to know a lot of these people in your life, and in your gym, is that there are people, like, when the shit hits the fan, you want them to be around. And you
Mm,
like I want that person to be around. Like when something goes wrong, when there's an accident, when there's this, when there's that, or some sort of tough situation, you're like, I want that person to be around. whether or not that answers the question, that's to
Yeah.
me what a resilient person is. I want that person to be around.
That's the very first. I showed you that this is pre-recording, but I
Mhm.
was telling Adam earlier that I have a binder that I print out. So anytime anybody sends me like a supportive message or shares a post or there's a card or something written, the very first one talks about when the gym was closed during COVID. And it's a picture of me, just my wife took it. I didn't know she took it, but she took a picture of me just behind a computer screen, working my ass off to make sure that all of our members continued to get quality training while our physical doors were closed. And one of our members made a post about, you know, I'm getting emotional here. The behind the scenes work that they don't always see. Um, I feel very privileged and honored and grateful to be that type of person. And it took a lot of people in my life to get me to that point. And I feel like it is a duty to be that person for other people now. It's like it's a hand me down now. So I'm glad you brought that up.
It's
Appreciate that.
beautiful. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's a privilege to be in that role when you can't be in that role, and, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's not about easy. It's about what's right, you know? And, well done. Congratulations on being that guy.
Appreciate you being on here, Adam. It's been an
Yeah.
awesome conversation. Thanks for coming on. And anything you'd like to mention to our listeners before we sign off today?
Absolutely. If you're interested in Enlifted, of course, if you're a coach or if you're someone who wants to learn about the stuff we talked about today, go to Enlifted, ENLIFTED.me and sign up for a free training. We have a really cool new free training up there. We just published that about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's our best one yet. You'll get to see Mark coaching live, recorded videos of these coaching sessions and what he does to these stories. He's excellent at what he does. So please sign up. It's free again. And check us out on Instagram at Enlifted Coaches, same spelling, and YouTube at Enlifted Coaches.
Get onto their podcast too. If you're not listening to the Enlifted podcast, do it, because I'll tell you now, I was not a fan of Enlifted when I first kind of dabbled into it. And then I started listening to the podcast. I'm like, oh, that's what they're talking about. And it literally hooked me. So
Kimberly, did you hear that
you gotta
one? He
plug
gave
it.
you a shout out. Yeah. Shout out to Kimberly, who's the host of the Get Enlifted podcast. She does a great job. We just restarted that one again. So I apologize for it skipping my mind. It just relaunched. It's going to be on YouTube as well here very soon. So
Love it.
yeah, please check that out.
Right on. Thanks again, Adam. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest episodes, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.